My deskmate got so freaked out by a horror novel that he chucked it into the lake. I bought an identical copy, soaked it, and stuffed it into his desk. That night, my deskmate drowned. I kept the secret and went on with classes. Until a waterlogged book appeared in my desk. 1. I was being watched. During class, I always felt something staring right at me. That persistent gaze was damp and clammy, smelling of stagnant water, just like the book in my desk drawer. A soaked, wrinkled horror novel. On its black and white cover, a disheveled female ghost had her face smeared with dark red mud. The pages, swollen several times their size, were interspersed with rotten seaweed and dead leaves. Whenever I got near the drawer, that damp, fishy smell filled my nostrils. I stayed perfectly still, pretending I hadn't noticed it. But cold sweat had already soaked through my school uniform shirt. Just a week ago, a waterlogged horror novel had appeared in my deskmate's desk drawer just like this. It was my prank. The day before, he'd snatched the horror novel, titled 4 Days, from my hands. The illustration scared him, so he casually tossed it into the school's man-made lake. I was furious, so I went to the bookstore, bought another copy of 4 Days, soaked it, and secretly put it in his desk drawer. He was definitely scared. He was on edge all day, and after school, he grabbed the horror novel and rushed out of the classroom. I really just wanted to scare him. But that same night, he died. Drowned in the school's man-made lake. The water in the man-made lake was only about 1.5 feet deep. But somehow, he'd run out of the dorm in the middle of the night and drowned silently in it. No one heard any struggling or calls for help. The next day, when news broke that a student had drowned in the lake, a lot of police officers came to the school. I was constantly worried they'd find out about the horror novel. But our school was a rural high school undergoing renovations, and due to electrical issues, they hadn't installed any security cameras. The police talked to every student in our class. When it was my turn, I was really nervous and didn't mention the book. They didn't ask either. It seemed like they hadn't connected the book to the drowning. A day passed, and the police hadn't found any leads. But rumors were flying everywhere. Students were saying it was a supernatural event. The school's haunted. I heard this place used to be a graveyard. Know why they dug that man-made lake? It's a feng shui thing. I heard when they were building the school, the excavators would stall as soon as they hit the foundation. They tried several machines, same result. Later, the old principal, he's the town mayor now, brought in a bunch of masters to check it out. They held several rituals, but nothing worked. Until one day, a nun knocked on the old principal's door asking for a bowl of rice. Then she told him this place was originally an ancient battlefield and a mass grave, full of negative energy. She said they should dig a lake in the middle of the school to absorb all that negative energy and resentful spirits, give them a place to stay, so construction could proceed. Later, once the school was built, the vibrant energy of the children would slowly neutralize it. But the nun also said everyone at the school needed to be good and righteous to overcome the evil. If they went down the wrong path, it would actually feed the negative energy in the lake, and sooner or later, something bad would happen. The student spoke with great animation, as if he'd been hiding under the bed when the nun gave the old principal advice. Someone else scoffed, "Bullshit. That was ages ago. Besides, haven't there been plenty of embezzlers and suicides at our school? People die here every year, and nothing major has happened." Ha ha ha, exactly. I sat at my desk, silent, but the presence of that horror novel was so strong. Ever since I found it, that inexplicable feeling of being watched made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What do I do? Something's after me. Could it be my deskmate's vengeful spirit? Does he hate me for scaring him? Am I going to die tonight? 2. Night fell. I wrapped myself tightly in my blanket. Luckily, my bunk was the first one by the wall as you entered, so having my back to the wall gave me a tiny bit of security. The feeling of being watched was relentless. I even mistook the wood grain on the bottom of the top bunk for eyes several times. Like countless eyes, big and small, staring at me in the dark. I clutched my blanket, afraid to even breathe too loudly. My roommate in the next bunk, Lauren, was also restless for some reason, tossing and turning. Eventually, she cursed and went out to the bathroom. The dorms were basic, no private bathrooms. You had to go to the communal restroom at the end of the hall. A few minutes later, I suddenly heard a scream from the end of the hall, followed by loud shouting and cursing. It was Lauren's voice. A lot of people were woken up, doors opened and closed one after another. But when they saw it was Lauren yelling, no one said anything, and the doors closed again. Lauren burst into our room, still cursing loudly, and started fumbling under her bed for a towel and a basin. A strong stench filled the dorm as she moved. Everyone opened their eyes. The dorm leader, who was closer to Lauren, asked, "What's wrong?" "Damn it. This sucks." A pipe burst in the upstairs bathroom and leaked all over me. Lauren yelled. "This damn school never does anything right. Shoddy work. They probably embezzled all the money, those bastards." No one dared to laugh. The dorm was silent. She kept muttering angrily as she grabbed her basin and towel and headed to the shower room next to the communal bathroom. The stench still lingered in the dorm, but no one moved. It was like everyone was asleep. Half an hour later, Lauren came back. Her face was pale, she'd even forgotten her basin, and she dived into her blanket, shivering. The dorm leader asked again, "What's wrong with you? Did you catch a cold?" Lauren's teeth were chattering, the clicking sound unsettling in the quiet night. After a long pause, she mumbled, "In the mirror, I saw her. It was her, she's come for me." The dorm instantly fell into a dead silence again. Only the dorm leader, after a long silence, said, "Don't be scared. We weren't afraid of her when she was alive, and we're certainly not afraid of her now that she's dead." I curled up in my blanket, saying nothing. I was a transfer student, new here. I didn't understand what they were talking about at all. 3. The next day, Lauren was dead. I was the one who found her. Last night, I drifted off sometime around midnight. When I woke up this morning, I was almost late. As I was pulling my shoes out from under the bed, I suddenly glimpsed something. It looked like a book under my bed. I squinted for a better look, and my scalp tingled. The horror novel was right there, under my bed. Wasn't it supposed to be in my desk drawer? I swear I hadn't touched it. The warning bell for morning study hall rang, so I didn't have time to deal with it and rushed to class. Sure enough, the horror novel was gone from my desk drawer. Could it have moved under my bed by itself while I was asleep? I got through the day feeling like I was sitting on pins and needles. Finally, evening came. There was a short free period before evening study hall. I needed to come back to get my workbook, and I also wanted to take a closer look at this horror novel that had somehow traveled from the classroom to the dorm. To build up some courage, I brought a classmate from the dorm next door with me. She pushed the door open first, went in, and then let out a scream. A foul stench filled the small room. Lauren was sprawled on the floor, her pajama pants pulled tight around her neck. Her normally fair face was purplish and swollen, her tongue lolling out. She was already stiff. The pants used for hanging were tied very low. At that height, if she just stood up straight, she wouldn't have been choked. She had somehow managed to strangle herself in a semi-squatting position. Vomit and excrement had seeped from her body, spreading across the stained concrete floor, a murky yellow, just like that mud-soaked horror novel. A dark yellow stream of urine snaked along the uneven floor towards my bed. Amidst my classmates' deafening screams, I bent down and looked under my bed. The horror novel was gone. It was empty under the bed. Nothing. So clean it was, as if what I'd seen that morning was a hallucination. The dorm supervisor came up to investigate amidst the screams, and then joined in screaming herself. The scene became chaotic. It was the first time I'd ever seen a dead body up close. The shock left me numb, like I'd lost my soul. I robotically watched the school call the police, saw countless officers arrive and disperse the crowd, and then, as usual, they came to question me. The person questioning me was a female police officer, maybe in her 40s. Her brow was furrowed, and she looked stern, but her voice was gentle. I hid the truth about the horror novel and told her everything else honestly. I didn't want to be labeled crazy. Although in the past. The questioning ended quickly. Our dorm room was sealed off, and we all had to temporarily move to other dorms with empty beds. The school administrators were furious. They ordered all faculty and staff to patrol the campus in shifts, with a special focus on the dorms at night. After lights out, I curled up in bed, listening to the footsteps of teachers patrolling outside the dorm. Clomp, clomp, the footsteps got closer. Squeak, the dorm room door was carefully opened and then closed. Heavy footsteps approached. My back was to the wall. Pretending to be asleep, I peeked my eyes open. A portly figure was leaning over the bunk opposite mine. It was my homeroom teacher, Bob. 4. Amidst rustling sounds, he quietly lifted the blanket of the girl in the next bunk and then skillfully slid his hand underneath. I held my breath, my heart pounding. What was going on? What was he doing? And with all that commotion, how was no one else awake? There were 6 of us in this dorm room. How could no one else have noticed? In utter shock, my gaze met the girls in the next bunk. Bob was busy with his rustling and didn't notice that the girl he was touching under the blanket had opened her eyes. But the girl's eyes met mine for a split second, then she closed them again. She was awake. But why? I watched Bob's greasy, fat body tremble, his heavy breathing echoing through the dorm. The girl on the top bunk peeked her head out, didn't dare look for long, and silently hid herself under her blanket again. I was ice cold, as if I'd been submerged in the lake. These past few days, my shoulders and back had been getting heavier and sorer, as if something was clinging to them, faintly carrying a rotten, fishy smell. Just then, I suddenly felt something like hair brush past my nostrils, followed by a rush of that fishy stench. The sensation was so strong that I shot up in bed and sneezed 4 times in a row. Bob jumped, startled. He snatched his hand back, clutching his chest, his face flushing red as he scolded, "You, what are you doing sitting up in the middle of the night? That's a disciplinary violation." My nose was incredibly itchy, and I kept sneezing. He was furious. "If you don't want to sleep, then don't sleep at all tonight. You, come with me to the office and copy the textbook, 10 times. You're not sleeping until you're done." Then he yanked me out of bed and dragged me towards the office at the end of the hall. He pulled me so hard I stumbled, without even my slippers on. My clothes nearly tore, exposing part of my shoulder. His breathing grew heavier. I was completely enveloped in his stale, middle-aged man's smell, and waves of nausea washed over me. The sounds of struggling and shoving were loud, and Bob's curses echoed in the hallway, but the entire floor was dead silent, as if everyone else was fast asleep. Not a single dorm room door opened. As I struggled, I managed to slip my hand into my pajama pocket. There was a small paper packet inside, which I forcefully twisted open. Bob violently yanked open the office door and shoved me inside. I stumbled and fell onto the office sofa, then scrambled back up, grabbing the desk lamp from the dorm supervisor's desk. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the supervisor's desk, and it was like a bucket of ice water had been dumped over my head, making me shiver. On the desk, there was a waterlogged horror novel. The familiar cover, the familiar, terrifying shape, swollen several times its original size from the water. 4 days. Wasn't it under my bed before? Did this mean that tonight, the vengeful spirit from the book was coming for my life, and I would die a bizarre death like my deskmate and Lauren? The weight on my shoulders and back grew heavier, more oppressive, and the fishy smell of water filled my nostrils. Bob stared at me intently, breathing heavily as he approached. Bang! Who's there? He whipped his head around. What are you two doing? Bursting through the door was the female police officer who had questioned me during the day. Her brow was furrowed, and she was holding a baton. Bob looked like he'd been struck. His murky eyes stared menacingly at the officer's baton and the radio on her belt. He forced an ugly smile and said, "Nothing, this student wasn't sleeping, disturbing others in the dorm. She's very disobedient, so I'm having her copy textbook pages here as punishment." The female officer glanced from Bob to my disheveled state, her right hand resting on the radio at her waist. "If a student is misbehaving, you teach them patiently, and they'll gradually understand. I think it's best to postpone the punishment until tomorrow. This office is so small, only one chair, it's too crowded for 3 people." Bob stared at her hand on the radio, his fat, greasy face plastered with a smile. "Well, aren't you on patrol? Taking a break is good, yes, good." The female officer walked right past him and sat down unceremoniously in the chair. "Yes, I'm tired. I'll rest for a bit. Sorry to trouble you, Bob." She wasn't young anymore. Fine wrinkles creased the corners of her eyes and mouth, and her neatly combed hair was streaked with gray. Years of experience as a police officer gave her an air of calm composure, sharp as a blade. With her sitting at the desk, the horror novel that had seemed so menacing before now appeared to shrink, looking like just an ordinary waterlogged book. But my heart was pounding harder and harder, almost leaping out of my chest. I deliberately avoided her gaze. Bob chuckled nervously. Okay. Then his expression changed instantly, and he snarled at me, "Get back to your dorm, now. Copy those textbook pages 10 times and hand them in before school ends tomorrow. If you don't, you can wait for your parents to come get you and take you home to reflect. Get out." I scrambled out of the office, ran back to the dorm, and buried myself under my blanket. The dorm was quiet, as if everyone was sound asleep. No one spoke. 5. The next morning, Bob didn't show up for class. In the afternoon, news came, he was dead. He'd ridden his bicycle onto the highway and been run over repeatedly by dozens of trucks. His body was mangled beyond recognition. It took the police a massive effort to scrape him off the road and collect as much of him as they could. His wife was wailing on the phone, saying her husband had died while working overtime patrolling the dorms and demanding compensation from the school. But the police found the thermos Bob had with him on duty that night. There was still unfinished alcohol inside. And that highway was a shortcut he often took on his way home. At this point, the truth seemed clear. Bob had drunk too much while on night duty, somehow decided to take a shortcut home, rode his bicycle onto the highway, and was tragically run over by trucks and killed. There were no security cameras or streetlights on that stretch of road, making it difficult to determine which vehicle had hit him first. But I broke out in a cold sweat. Luckily, the police found it in time. I had been about to wash Bob's thermos. Our class had a duty roster. Whoever was on duty not only had to clean the entire classroom but also empty Bob's trash and fetch water for him. This morning, I had just finished emptying the trash and was about to go to the teacher's office to get Bob's cup for water when the female officer appeared behind me. "Where's your homeroom teacher? Isn't first period his class? Why haven't I seen him? I have some questions for him." I turned around. I haven't seen him either." When the female officer saw it was me, she softened her voice. "How did you sleep last night? You look pale. You didn't stay up all night, did you?" "Don't worry, the teacher was just angry. Study hard during the day, and remember not to disturb your classmates' rest at night." I nodded. She asked, "What are you doing here? Are you looking for Bob to apologize?" I said, "No, I'm on duty today. I need to get water for the teacher." The female officer frowned. "You go back to morning study hall first. I'll get the water. Go on." She hesitated for a moment, then called me back. "Do you have a cell phone?" I shook my head. She pulled a basic-looking, old-fashioned phone from her pocket. "My number's saved in here. Your school isn't very safe right now. You can borrow my old phone for now. Be careful. If anything happens, call the police or call me. Don't break it, and don't play games on it. You have to give it back to me later. Alright, go on." After I left, she closed the office door behind her. I stood at the door for a long time, hesitating, but still couldn't bring myself to knock. If I told her I suspected that everything happening now, the 3 consecutive deaths at school, was connected to the horror novel I'd soaked as a prank, that the novel carried a deadly curse, would she think I was crazy? Or would she consider me a suspect and arrest me for questioning? After all, I was still taking. The small pill bottle in my pocket, next to the phone, felt hard and uncomfortable. The label read sertraline. I couldn't risk it. 6. I went back to my seat. Before I could even settle in, my scalp prickled, and cold sweat broke out instantly. I moved a stack of freshly distributed, new worksheets on my desk, and there it was, the horror novel, sitting right on my desk. Was it no longer content to stay in the desk drawer? The pages were soaking wet, as if just fished out of the lake. Green seaweed and brownish yellow mud caked the cover. It sat there, faintly seeming to swell, like a grotesque living creature, bloated and satisfied after finally consuming someone. As it slowly swelled, a corner of the cover gradually curled up, as if inviting me to open it. The overwhelming fishy smell of water enveloped me again, thick and cloying. My shoulders felt incredibly heavy, as if someone was clinging to them, pressing down hard, making my entire shoulders and the back of my neck ache with a heavy soreness. I even felt something like strands of hair brush my nostrils, making my nose tingle. I sat numbly in my chair, my mind a chaotic mess. Finally, I clenched my jaw. No more just daring to glance at it from afar. I grabbed the curled-up cover and opened the book. I've been waiting to die for so long, but I'm still not dead. Today, I'm going to see exactly what kind of evil thing you are. I opened it to the flyleaf. There was writing on it. It looked like a student's handwriting, neat, delicate, and somewhat immature fountain pen script, spelling out Fiona. Like a girl's name. That was strange. The book I'd soaked was a new copy I bought from the small school bookstore. No one should have written their name in it. Could it be that this was the book my drowned deskmate had thrown into the lake? I stared at the name, searching my memory for any recollection of her, but I didn't know any student named Fiona. But the handwriting, it felt vaguely familiar. It looked a bit like my own. Even our names, Chloe and Fiona, echoed each other. My parents divorced when I was young. I took my mom's last name and my name is Chloe. I gritted my teeth and kept flipping. The waterlogged, wrinkled pages were hard to turn. There were also some dark brown stains that looked disturbingly like blood. Tucked into one page was a slip of paper. I carefully took out the note and tried to decipher the blurred, water-bled writing. Today at noon, 12 o'clock, come to the man-made lake. Alone. I felt all the hairs on my body stand on end. My intuition told me that it wanted me to go to the man-made lake alone, today. What was there? After my deskmate drowned in it, the school had drained the lake, and the police had put up caution tape, forbidding anyone to go near. Even though no one should have been there since the incident, the cafeteria and the sports field weren't far. If I yelled, everyone should be able to hear me. The midday sun was strong, which gave me a bit more courage. I really didn't want to be tormented by these secrets and this creepy book any longer. I decided to go and see. 7. The man-made lake had been drained. I carefully climbed down, and the soft, wet mud that had accumulated at the bottom for years instantly engulfed my shoes. Countless naturally grown fish and shrimp lay rotting at the bottom, the stench so thick it was almost tangible, making me dizzy. Black mud was everywhere. I used a stick to poke around aimlessly, but aside from turning over some pale, dead fish, I found nothing. Such a small lake couldn't possibly hide a person. What was really going on? Was I just overthinking things? Just as I was thinking this, I suddenly felt a tremendous force shove me down. Then I heard a boom. Louder than the biggest firecracker I'd ever heard during New Year's, making my ears ring. I was stuck in the soft mud, choked on a mouthful of it, and my chest and head throbbed with pain. It took me a while to get up. Then, I froze. Immediately after, I started vomiting uncontrollably. The school cafeteria was gone. Literally gone. It had been blown flat. A thick smell of blood and burning flesh filled the air. Amidst the scattered bricks and debris, I saw bloody, mangled, human remains. Half a hand lay near the edge of the lake. 12 noon. The cafeteria would have been packed. The rural school had limited meal service. If you missed mealtime, you didn't eat. So at this time, all the students and teachers in the school would have been in the cafeteria. I vomited violently, tears streaming down my face, dripping onto my mud-caked shoes. The fishy smell of mud clung to me. As the world spun around me, someone pulled me up from the lake bed, roughly wiping my face with their sleeve. The pain jolted me back to my senses. It was the female officer. Before I climbed down into the man-made lake, I had called her and confessed about the horror novel prank, telling her the book might be connected to the deaths. Worried she'd interrupt me with something like "Are you crazy?" I'd closed my eyes and blurted everything out as fast as I could, then asked her to come find me by the lake. Only a few minutes had passed between me asking her to find me, climbing into the lake, and her appearance. But in that time, the school had been turned upside down. The female officer's hand supporting me was steady, but her lips were trembling. The radio on her hip was squawking non-stop. Her colleagues were assessing casualties. Through the haze, I vaguely heard a sentence: "Captain, head count complete, no casualties in our unit." In her arms, I finally stopped vomiting and burst into tears, wailing. 8. Afterward, I was taken to the police station and questioned multiple times. Again and again, I told them about the horror novel 4 Days and its connection to the deaths. Looking at my medical records from the local clinic, which showed a prescription for sertraline, the officers frowned deeply. History of depression, with bipolar tendencies. She isn't schizophrenic, is she? Scared by the deaths and making up stories, someone whispered, only to be elbowed by a colleague. Stop it. The poor girl's just in high school. They never found the waterlogged horror novel. Not in the dorm, not in the classroom. Eventually, even I began to doubt if it had all been a hallucination. The police contacted my mother and advised her to take me away, preferably to transfer schools, to avoid too much trauma. And so, the incident finally came to a close. I don't know how the case was handled afterward, but I knew the police were trying not to disrupt my current life too much, to avoid further upsetting the only student who had survived from that school. I was unfortunate, but also very lucky. 9. Before I left that remote little town, the female officer asked to meet me. I went as arranged. Evening, by a deserted mountain hollow, just the two of us. That day, the person who answered the phone, it wasn't really your mother, was it? She had a cigarette dangling from her lips, the smoke curling up into the fading sunlight. I nodded. No, it wasn't. My mother is dead. Is there anyone else in your family? I was silent for a long time before saying, no one. I used to have a sister, but she's dead too. She died here. In this town. At this rural school. The female officer was also silent for a long while, then sighed. Are you wondering why I didn't expose you? She said. I didn't speak. She ignored my silence and continued, my daughter, last year, she was also a student at your high school. The smoke swirled around her, seeming to steep the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes and her scattered white hairs. She seemed to age years in an instant. Even her usually straight back seemed a little stooped. My daughter was exceptionally smart, hardworking, and sensible. She always got top grades. I never had to worry about her. I was always so pleased to have such a filial, understanding child. But later, I wished she could have been more willful, less sensible. Wished she could have told her mother when things happened. I was busy with work back then. She never gave me any cause for concern, so I threw myself into my career. There was an opportunity for a secondment to a higher department. If I took it, I could get promoted to the city, escape the grind in this small town, earn a bit more, so I went. It was a few hours' drive to the city and back. With my heavy workload, it was hard for me to come back often. My daughter did well in her exams and got into this magnet high school, where she could board. She also told me not to worry about her, to focus on my work, and that we'd move to the city together later. I divorced early on. Her father cheated, and she stayed with me. We lost contact after the divorce, so there was no one to help. Looking back, I was truly heartless. Such a young child, just starting high school, and I let her board all the time, not even coming home for winter and summer breaks. This school didn't allow cell phones. If caught, it was a serious disciplinary action. The kids had to line up every day to use phone cards at the payphones. Every time my daughter wanted to call me, she had to wait in line for ages, often missing meals at the cafeteria. I always told her to eat properly, take care of herself, and not to call mom all the time. She suddenly paused. Dusk had fallen. The light was dim, and only the cigarette cherry glowed intermittently in the darkness. She died. She couldn't take the bullying anymore, so she jumped off a building, committed suicide. After a long silence, she choked out the words. Before she died, she was still worried about causing me trouble. She wrote a suicide note, clearly explaining where she'd hidden the pocket money she'd saved over the years, hoping I wouldn't be too sad and would live happily. Wordlessly, I stepped forward and hugged her as she wept. I'm a failed mother. I don't deserve to be her mom. I should go to hell. She trembled. I've handled so many cases, arrested so many suspects, but I couldn't find the evidence to nail those bastards. My daughter committed suicide, and the school had her cremated before I could even get back. If I hadn't found her diary, I might never have known the truth. This school, the students, the teachers, the bullies, the ones who looked away, they're all murderers. Including myself. You did very well. I didn't expect someone so young to be so bold. Bold enough to let an explosion settle all accounts of sin. She suddenly laughed. It's truly karma. What goes around comes around. The female officer gently pushed me away and stood up straight. She regained her former resilience, standing there like a taut bowstring. But, child, you're still so young. I hope you can forget all this, leave this place, and start your life over. Don't let the heavy past drag you down. You're my benefactor. From now on, if you ever face any difficulties, the number I gave you will always be reachable. I nodded and finally said, thank you. I was able to get my revenge thanks to your help. And on behalf of my sister, Fiona, thank you too. 10. Fiona. The name written on the flyleaf of the horror novel. It was my sister's name. She took my dad's last name. Her name was Fiona. The dark brown bloodstains in the book, that was her blood. I still remember seeing videos on my male deskmate's phone, my sister being beaten, forced to drink filthy, stinking waste from the toilet, being slapped hard in the face with a book until her mouth bled. When my deskmate slapped her, he was laughing gleefully. Later, he showed the video around, bragging to everyone. He even played my sister's screams openly during class breaks, laughing even harder. But when I held his head underwater, why wasn't he laughing then? My roommate, Lauren, the one who hanged herself with her pajama pants, she was laughing happily in the video too. Forcing someone to drink waste, that was her brilliant idea, the one that drew cheers. I also saw my sister being dragged into the boys' bathroom and beaten. Bob walked by, ignored her cries for help, and disgustedly walked around her. When she was dragged out of her dorm and beaten by Lauren's gang of bullies, the people around stayed silent. Those who looked away were also murderers. At first, I only wanted revenge on my enemies. Later, I realized every single one of them was guilty. Including myself. Why didn't I find her sooner? My parents divorced when I was very young. Mom took me, and Dad took my sister. My dad put on a good act before marriage, but afterward, his gambling addiction and abusive nature were revealed. Luckily, Mom realized it early and resolutely decided to divorce him. She had wanted to take both of us girls, but Dad secretly took my sister after school one day, and they disappeared without a trace. Mom and I could never contact them again. As a mother and daughter trying to survive in a big city, life was very hard. We didn't have the extra time or energy to search for them. And Mom was always very resistant to any contact with Father. The trauma that man had inflicted on her was too deep, she couldn't even bear to mention him and was even more afraid that if they reconnected, he would hurt me. Until last year, when my mom died of illness. I was all alone, with no one left to worry about. So, I started searching for my sister. After many inquiries, I came to this remote little town. And then I learned that my father had died 3 years ago in a fight after an argument over gambling debts. My sister had died a year ago, on a winter night, by jumping off the school roof. Suicide. At that time, I was already in grad school. Yunnan University, majoring in biological sciences, specializing in edible mushroom cultivation. In 2006, thanks to my relatively young appearance and the crude record keeping in this remote town, I dropped out of grad school, disguised myself as a high school senior, and came to this rural high school. In the first month, I figured out the pedantic, backward, yet intricate network of connections behind this school. The homeroom teacher, Bob, was a middle-aged man with a rape conviction. But because his uncle was the town mayor and had previously been the principal of this school, even after the crime came to light, he wasn't fired. He continued to teach at this school and molest female students. The students who bullied others, more or less, also had family members in important positions in town, which made them even more brazen. I was alone, with no power or support. Getting revenge seemed as difficult as reaching the sky. But I had brought a type of fungus. Its spores are colorless and odorless, like fine dust, but they can cause muscle relaxation and weakened willpower in those who ingest them. With a little guidance, they can induce hallucinations, even making people completely obedient to those around them. It also metabolizes very quickly, enough to be broken down by the body's metabolism shortly before death. With the forensic technology available at the time, no trace of it could be detected. I cultivated this fungus in a book and brought it into the school. Later on, I discovered that horror novel, 4 Days. My male deskmate was holding that book, laughing mockingly, and showing off to everyone around him about his heroic deed of using that book to beat that bitch Fiona. I listened with a blank expression, and that night, I put a tiny amount of spores in his water cup. He had nightmares all night, and the next day, furious, he threw the book into the school's man-made lake. Later, the book reappeared in his desk drawer, soaking wet. That night, he drowned in the lake. Next was my roommate, Lauren. Under the hallucinogenic effect of the spores, she believed she was the ghost of a bullied girl who had died and come back for revenge, and she literally strangled herself to death. I squatted in front of her, watching her face turn purple and swell, her tongue uncontrollably lolling out, her eyes bulging and bloodshot, and I smiled just as happily as she did when she bullied others. killing Bob was a bit more troublesome. After all, my opportunities to tamper with his food or drink were limited. My original plan was to put the spores in his water cup when it was my turn on duty. But that night, when he dragged me to the office to copy textbook pages, it actually gave me an opportunity. During the standoff between Bob and the female officer, I secretly smeared the spores on the bread he was having as a late-night snack. He was fat as a pig, got hungry easily, and was always snacking. Sure enough, after all that exertion, he quickly finished the bread. And, as was his habit, he had a little alcohol to go with it. I had previously bought a phone identical to his from a flea market and had placed it on the office windowsill that evening. When it rang, he indeed thought it was his own phone and answered it. On the other end was his wife, saying their child had a fever and needed him to come home as soon as possible, the sooner the better. Actually, it was fake. It was a recording I had prepared. During my previous stakeouts tracking Bob home, I discovered he liked to take a shortcut, riding his bicycle for a short stretch on the highway. That stretch of road had no streetlights and no security cameras. Because it was remote, it was mostly used by large trucks. And so, under multiple suggestions, his brain controlled by the spores, he sped towards his own dead end. However, the only oversight was also here. I was almost exposed. When Bob left for home, he took the fake phone I had placed there, leaving his real phone in the office. I followed him all the way until he was hit by a vehicle. Then I damaged his own phone and threw it nearby, faking that it had been knocked away in the crash. But it was too dark there, and I didn't dare use a bright light to search. That night, I couldn't find the fake phone I had given him at the scene. After I returned to the dorm, I tossed and turned until dawn, unable to sleep. The next day, in Bob's office, the female officer handed me a phone, saying it was her old one and I could use it to contact her if needed. It was the fake phone. I was instantly terrified. But she didn't say anything. From that moment on, I knew she was helping me. And today, I finally understood why she would help me. 11. The final explosion at the cafeteria happened because when it was first built, the gas line installation violated fire safety regulations, creating a huge safety hazard. It never passed the fire inspections. But it was all hushed up by powerful figures behind the scenes. No one took it seriously. The school administrators were corrupt and self-serving, only caring about the school's funds. Who would bother tearing down and rebuilding the cafeteria? They didn't eat there anyway. But that day was different. That day, the mayor, who was also the school's former principal, the well-connected uncle who could protect Bob even after his rape case, the school leader who had ignored fire inspection procedures years ago to open the school quickly, was visiting the school because of the recent deaths. They had chosen to have lunch and hold a reception in the cafeteria. All the school administrators were there to greet him. At that moment, the long-aged valve on the gas line leaked. Actually, it was bound to leak sooner or later. I just advanced the timeline a bit. And the old principal's favorite habit was to have a cigarette before a meal. And so, boom. The world fell silent. I sat on the train leaving the small town, looking out the window. I felt no joy at my successful revenge. Instead, my heart sank deeper and deeper, as if into dark waters, oppressed, shriveled, and crushed. A leader at the mayor's level, who had built a non-compliant cafeteria due to his own illegal actions during the school's construction, ultimately reaped what he sowed. He was blown up in the cafeteria, along with nearly 100 other people. It was a complete scandal, so it was heavily suppressed by the local authorities and never made the news. But I wish none of it had ever happened. I wish my sister, Fiona, were still alive, happy, and well. In another year, she could have gone to college. I wish the female officer's daughter were also alive and well. Maybe the three of us would have gotten along great and become good friends. The fishy stench of mud, mixed with the smell of burnt human flesh and blood, now lingers in my nostrils, never to dissipate. This is my sin. But I will live on, strong. Because I deserve to live, and live well, more than those evil bullies. Only then can I prove that life is worth living.